Dear delegate, may I have your attention, please? May I have your attention? I just want to inform you that in CR1 we have overflow of what's happening in the plenary, so you can follow also from CR1. Thank you.
Excellencies,
It's channel 1 for English.
distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call the meeting to order. I invite delegates to take their seats. Good morning. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you all to 26th meeting of the subsidiary body on scientific, technical and technological advice. My sincere thanks to Ms. Inger Andersen and our UNEP colleagues for welcoming us to their headquarters, as well as the government of Kenya for welcoming us to this beautiful country. We have all heard about the devastation suffered by the people of Kenya recently due to heavy rainfall and floods. And our hearts go out to those who have lost family members and homes and are left in dire circumstances. The people of Kenya are in our thoughts as we begin our work today. It has been nearly 16 months since the adoption of Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Despite the historic achievement in adopting the most ambitious set of goals and targets for nature ever seen at the global level, we now find ourselves facing an even bigger challenge of translating this framework into action. Parties have been working hard to make the framework real in their countries by setting national targets and updating or developing their national biodiversity strategies and action plans. And key institutions and civil society organizations are mobilized to play their critical roles. And there is much work ongoing to build the legal, institutional, technical, and most importantly, human capacities for implementation. The good news is that there is a wealth of knowledge and experience for us to use and build on as we walk this journey together. And we have a key opportunity to evolve this knowledge base through collective learning in support of effective conservation, sustainable use, and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits from the use of biodiversity. We have seen clearly the weakness and shortcomings of poorly informed decision-making, and we are well aware of the urgency for action. In this regard, the work of SABSTA is crucial, now more than ever. Remember that this is not simply a body that prepares draft decision for COP. Rather, it is an essential forum to draw lessons from experiences across the global, regional, and national levels, to synthesize emerging knowledge and identify critical data gaps, to identify directions for scientific and technical work under the Convention, and to ensure that our efforts are guided by the best available information in order to enable the achievement of the ambitious goals and targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Colleagues, this meeting of SABSTA is especially important, as we are at the critical moment in time to ensure that our actions are guided by a robust foundation of scientific and technical knowledge, tools, and guidelines. For this reason, you have before you nearly 1,700 pages of pre-session information and reference documents and reports, condensing a wide spectrum of scientific and technical knowledge on issues regarding the monitoring framework, scientific and technical needs for implementation, synthetic biology, risk assessment and risk management, detection and identification of living modified organisms, marine and coastal and island biodiversity, as well as biodiversity and health. This in-depth scientific and technical preparation for this meeting was possible thanks to the hard work of 3 ad hoc technical expert groups, respectively on indicators, synthetic biology, and risk assessment. We had a productive discussion on the outcomes on these 3 expert groups 2 days ago and the information workshop. And I reiterate my great appreciation to all co-chairs and expert group members for their valuable contributions. As we hope for COP to be able to adopt sound decisions on these extensive issues, we will need to work hard to make as much progress as possible and find solutions to areas of divergent views. In this regard, I implore you all to be clear and focused in your interventions and to proactively seek solutions and compromise. With this, I look forward to working with you and wish you all the best for a productive and successful meeting. I now invite Ms. Inger Andersen, Executive Director of the UN Environment Programme, to deliver opening remarks. Ms. Andersen, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good morning, and a warm welcome to you, of course, Ms. Senka Barudanovic, SABSTA Chair, to Ms. Ji-Hun Lee, Secretary of the Subsidiary Body on Scientific and Technical and Technological Advice, to you, my dear colleague, David Cooper, Acting Executive Secretary of the Convention, but most of all to you, the delegates here in Nairobi for this SABSTA meeting, people who are committed to biodiversity, you who helped make the Kunming-Montreal Agreement real. It's now time to roll up our sleeves and make it come to life, and that is why you are here today. So colleagues and friends, it is always a great pleasure to welcome an international meeting to our headquarters, UNEP headquarters here in Nairobi. And this time, I have the pleasure of welcoming for the second consecutive meeting of the subsidiary body to UNEP's home. I do thank the kind words of the chair for expressing sympathy for the tragedy that has befallen our beloved host country. We from the United Nations system have stepped up, of course, to support our Kenyan nation at this moment of need. As I said in our last gathering, we need a whole of government, whole of society approach to make the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework a success. And for that approach to become reality, every country must have access to the right science, the right technology, and the right technical skills. And this body is tasked with helping us make this happen. So please allow me to look at just 3 areas where there are maybe some gaps or some challenges, or let's put it more differently, some real opportunities that this body can do something about. And one is, of course, increasing accountability and capacity. The GBF's monitoring framework puts strong emphasis on transparency, and rightly so, on responsibility and on accountability. So we have to agree on metrics of success by which we are going to hold ourselves and each other accountable. We have to find simple but meaningful ways of measuring. We can't overburden those that are still challenged with capacity constraints. But many parties have reported barriers on using the framework. So implementation of this framework will require strengthened national capacities for monitoring and for reporting progress. And it will require a coherent approach to aggregating national data that helps to review progress at a global stage. So therefore, capacity building and support to countries that need that will be critical, and also ensuring, as I say, that the reporting framework is simple but meaningful. The issue of capacity is an issue across the board. Developing nations need support on technical issues, such as, for example, synthetic biology, which is a subject of recommendations being presented to help address inequitable participation. So I ask this body to take key decisions that will enable countries to deliver on their commitments. My second point is to advance the global action plan on biodiversity and health. I just come from Stockholm, where together with Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, my colleague and head of WHO, and other global leaders, we hosted the Global Leaders Group on antimicrobial resistance. We understand that planetary health is closely linked with human health, but the health sector currently does not link up well with the issues on the environmental agenda. The Global Action Plan is a chance to bring biodiversity to the attention of decision makers across government, all of government and society, and to spur them into action. So we need provisions that create strong incentives for countries to integrate health dimensions into biodiversity and to integrate biodiversity into the health sector. And as my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Tedros explained very clearly, these two are absolutely essential keys to tackle the global crises. The plan before you outlines concrete activities on how to do this. So I ask that you take this opportunity of this meeting to strengthen the plan and recommend it for adoption by COP16 in Cali. And the third point that I want to raise is the use of the Global Oceans Agenda to really elevate the marine and coastal work. Now, we at UNEP, we're proud to have worked in the Coastal and Oceans Agenda since the 70s, when the regional conventions, the regional seas conventions were established. Here at UNEP, many still hosted by UNEP, others not so. And these conventions are, in a way, biodiversity within national jurisdiction. But the biodiversity doesn't know where it is, within or beyond, and therefore creating those links between one big planet of ocean is critical. And so the UN Biodiversity Area Beyond National Jurisdiction Treaty, the BBNJ, and the Oceans Decade are really a way to put ocean action on the global agenda. We have to take advantage of this. And this body can collaborate with UNEP, who have been working in this space for more than 50 years, on identifying and recognizing effective area-based conservation measures, on developing guidelines to describe areas that meet the criteria for ecological and biologically significant marine areas. Because after all, we want to protect that which matters, not that which is insignificant. And this body can also be supportive in identifying options for collaboration in the implementation of the BBNJ. So friends, let me also thank the 3 ad hoc technical groups who have worked so diligently, giving their time and effort and scientific insight to the papers that are before you. And let me thank David Cooper as well as the Secretariat of the Convention for Biological Diversity for the hard work they always put in. I thank you for all the work that you've done on ensuring that science and technical and technological knowledge work to back healthy biodiversity for healthy people and for a healthy planet. And I certainly look forward to hearing about the strong decisions that I hope that you will take to advance this agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson, for your opening remarks and messages. I now invite Acting Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, Mr. David Cooper, to address the meeting.
Thank you very much, Chair, dear Senka. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, observers, colleagues, let me join the Chair and the Executive Director in welcoming you to this 26th meeting of SBSTA. I'd like to begin by also expressing my solidarity with the victims of the recent floods here in Kenya, also in Brazil and in other parts of our planet. I'll continue with these floods we've seen in many parts of the world, with the wildfires we saw last summer, with the droughts that we...
If I may ask distinguished delegate from Ukraine to wait for opening remarks to be delivered, and you will be given the floor.
No, he's not agreeing.
Okay.
You have control over this meeting. You can decide what to do. You can tell him to sit down, or you...
Distinguished delegate from Ukraine, I will ask Acting Executive Secretary to continue opening remarks, and you will be given the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was expressing my solidarity with the victims of the recent floods here in Kenya, in other parts of the world, and also of other catastrophes caused by environmental issues. We are paying the price for inaction. More and more, we're seeing people not only in in coastal areas, in small islands, in rural areas, but also in urban areas, suffering and becoming the victims of frequent and severe environmental catastrophes. These are a result of climate change, yes, but also of ecosystem degradation, of biodiversity loss. The sense of urgency to reverse the trends gives us more responsibility in working together, in supporting governments, supporting communities, to act fast to achieve the global commitments that have been set. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, or the Biodiversity Plan, is an urgent plan to halt and reverse the loss of biodiversity. As we know, biodiversity and ecosystem services mitigate environmental catastrophes and also enhance the capability to recover from them. We cannot dissociate biodiversity loss from the other global issues, including climate change, the water crisis, the pollution crisis. The loss of ecosystem services, too much water or too little water, changes of the Earth's temperature, they are all related, they are all contributing to biodiversity loss and vice versa. The Biodiversity Plan is an important part, an essential part of the response to these challenges. Some question how realistic it, given how ambitious the goals and targets are. But given the impacts that we see, we have to ask ourselves, is there any other path, any other realistic path other than taking the actions we need to implement the biodiversity plan to achieve these goals and targets? We're here this week at Subster 26 to further strengthen our collective efforts with scientific and technical and technological advice, with inputs from the technical expert groups to support the implementation of the biodiversity plan. This meeting, of course, will be followed by the 4th meeting of the subsidiary body on implementation next week, and both meetings will then contribute to COP16 in Cali, Colombia, later this year. We see greater and greater attention to these issues. We have here more than 1,400 delegates registered, including 600 representing parties from more than 150 countries. We've been able to finance on request representatives from the eligible parties, and I would like to recognize the 13 governments for their generous financial support that have helped make this possible, namely Austria, Belgium, Canada, Finland, Germany, Japan, the Republic of Korea, New Zealand, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. Thanks to their contributions, we've funded 100 developing country parties to participate in this meeting. But let me also take this opportunity to note that as we approach the upcoming meeting of the Working Group on Digital Sequence Information, the 5th meeting of SBI, and COP16 and the concurrent meetings of the protocols, we will need additional funding. We've issued a notification to this effect recently, and I urge all those parties in a position to do so, to contribute so that we can ensure full participation in the upcoming meetings. I also would like to acknowledge the presence of representatives of indigenous peoples and of local communities in this meeting. We have over 80 representatives, and we look forward to their active engagement in the meeting. Thanks to Australia, Canada, Germany, Sweden, Switzerland, and the UK for helping to support the funding of some representatives from these indigenous peoples and from local communities. Let me also thank Kenya, our colleagues in Kenya, as well as our colleagues in the UN here, for welcoming us despite the difficulties caused by the recent flooding. As the Executive Director mentioned already, a key part to assuring the implementation of the biodiversity plan is that we're able to monitor progress towards it. And that is why the first substantive agenda item that you have before you is so important, the work on finalizing the monitoring framework, including the list of indicators that parties will use in reporting on progress. I would like to give my sincere appreciation to all of those that have been working through the ad hoc technical expert group on monitoring over the past year and a half for putting together such a comprehensive and complete set of proposals to this body. The ATEG has drawn upon the experience of parties, it's drawn upon the inputs from a whole range of parties, it's drawn upon the scientific basis, and we have, as the Chair mentioned, very complete reports setting out the methodologies for the indicators proposed. I encourage you to make full use of the work that the ATEG has achieved, to build on this work, to focus perhaps your interventions and your negotiations on the draft decision, and trust the work of this important process that has already been guided by the COP and this body. You also have before you a paper looking at the scientific and technical tools available to support implementation and achievement of the various targets of the framework. This builds on the mandate from COP15 and also from Substa 25. You see that we have a lot of tools available. There is no excuse for inaction. There's also the opportunity, of course, to continue working, including working with our partner organizations, to further develop tools where there are gaps, and to use this as an opportunity to mainstream the biodiversity agenda in the agendas of other bodies. Other work that is before you that has been well prepared by ad hoc technical expert groups concerns the horizon scanning on synthetic biology and the guidelines on risk assessment and risk management for living modified organisms containing engineered gene drives, including those to control the inheritance patterns of mosquitoes. I think we can be very proud of the work that has been undertaken under the auspices of this body through these technical expert groups. The work available before you, I believe, represents the cutting edge on the science policy interface, and it demonstrates the continued relevance of this convention and of the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. Finally, we have important work on biodiversity and health and on marine and coastal biodiversity. I will echo the remarks just now of the Executive Director on these issues and on their importance. These are coming years. Let's keep the momentum to implement the biodiversity plan. Let's keep the spirit of multilateralism that prevailed at COP15 that led to the adoption of the biodiversity plan. Let's work together to achieve success this week. I thank you very much for your attention.
I thank you, Mr. Cooper, for your opening remarks. I would like to reiterate my thanks to you and your team for your hard work in preparing this meeting. With these statements of the subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technological advice open. Distinguished delegate from Ukraine, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ukraine expresses a strong protest to the presence of the meetings is an attempt of the Russian delegation to politicize the entire process. In this regard, Ukrainian side requests the Secretariat to take the urgent measures to ensure that Russian delegation is not wearing political symbols during the above-mentioned meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Ukraine. Russian delegation of Russian Federation.
Right of reply.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, distinguished delegates, my delegation deeply regrets that wearing of the St. George ribbon by a member of the Russian delegation has caused such a strong reaction of the Ukraine delegation. First of all, we would like to emphasize that it's a symbol used in Russia to commemorate Russian veterans who took part in the World War II. It's a symbol of victory over Nazism in this war, which was achieved together with our allies. We paid for this victory with 27 million lives. This victory also led to the creation of the United Nations. So wearing of this ribbon is of cultural and historical significance beyond any political meaning. Secondly, there are no specific regulations prohibiting the wearing of the St. George ribbon at the UN. We would like to stress that UN should uphold principle of freedom of expression. Many delegations wear their own symbols. And to wrap up, let us to commemorate and celebrate our Victory Day in Russia the way we deem appropriate. And let us advance along the established agenda. And we regret that productive work of this forum was held hostage due to its politicization. Thank you.
I wish to thank both delegations for their statements. Now, I would like to move to agenda item 2, organizational matters. But before we start our work, I would like to invite Secretariat to provide some logistical information. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, distinguished delegates. It is a great pleasure to see you all again here in Nairobi. First of all, please note that this meeting is being held in person only. There is no online participation available. All plenary sessions will, however, be streamed on UN Web TV and YouTube in all 6 official UN languages. Let me now begin with information on how to use the microphones. To request the floor, press the button once and the light will turn green. When the chair gives you the floor, the technician will activate your microphone. The light will then turn red and you can start speaking. Delegates seated behind microphones allocated to indigenous peoples and local communities and major stakeholder groups such as women, youth, NGOs, and business and industry should identify their organization before commencing their intervention so that their statement can be properly attributed. Delegates are requested to keep within the assigned time when taking the floor and to speak at a reasonable speed to facilitate the work of the interpreters. I will explain shortly in detail the assigned time for interventions. Secondly, regarding statement, delegates are requested to upload their written statement using the online application on the meeting page. In case of any difficulty in using the online system, delegates may send the statement by email to statements@cbd.int. It greatly facilitates the work of the interpreters if you upload your statement prior to delivery. However, they will be posted on the website only after delivery. In any case, statements must be submitted within 1 hour after the close of the session in which the agenda item was considered. In your submission, please make sure to include the name of your country or organization and the agenda item on the first page of the document that is uploaded. Uploading instructions were included in your priority pass email along with your dedicated link, which lead you directly to the upload page. Kindly note that for reasons of transparency, all statement will be made public. There is no option for private submissions. In the event that a party or observer has submitted more than one version of their statement, we'll consider the latest one that has been submitted overrides previous versions, and only this version will be considered. In view of the heavy agenda item for this meeting, the chair will be limiting interventions to 5 minutes on behalf of the regions, 3 minutes for individual parties, 4 minutes for IPLCs and major stakeholder groups, and 2 minutes for non-parties and observers as time allows. A clock is provided for you on the screen to help you to manage your time, but please do not speed up your reading. Thirdly, regarding the meeting rooms, all plenary session will take place in this room, CL2, where seating is fixed. Parties and observers should ensure that they are sitting at the correct nameplate so that when they request the floor, they will be identified correctly to the chair. Stakeholder groups have sections identified by nameplates. CL2 will be used for plenary session and CL1 set up as overflow room with sound in English. Should delegates wish to follow the session in a different UN languages, please connect to UN Web TV or YouTube's live stream on your laptop or phone through the meeting calendar and select the desired language. CL1 and combined CL3 and 4 will be used for contact groups. Both of these rooms are equipped with programmable electronic nameplates. Specifically, United Nations organizations, intergovernmental organizations, indigenous people and local community organizations, and major stakeholder groups will be allocated rows in advance in both contact group rooms by category and not by name of the organization. Delegates from parties and other governments are kindly requested to consult this Nairobi 2024 meeting page under the header Microphone Numbers for Contact Groups, which provides a list of each country's login code and step-by-step instruction on how to program the electronic name plate. Please note that only one plate per party or other government can be programmed in the same room. And if the country enters the same code twice, the most recent one will override the previous selection. It is therefore important for parties to coordinate amongst themselves with regard to who should activate their respective country plate. Next, regarding side events will take place at 1:15 p.m. each day of the meeting starting today, and each evening at 6:15 p.m. starting tomorrow. Please consult the online schedule as well as the monitors and the CBD event app for the event title, location, and time. In addition to the schedule for side event, the CBD event app provides easy access to the meeting schedule and documents. It is available both for Apple and Android devices and can be downloaded at the link you see on the screen. Next, regarding the share your content link on the meeting web portal. You will note a share your content tab located on the meeting web page. Using this link, parties and observers are invited to share publications, information materials, event flyers that are relevant to the issues being addressed by this meeting. Now let me offer a few words about our meeting venue. The entrance to the venue is open daily from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. Delegates may remain on the premises as late as necessary and may exit during the evening and late night hours as per meeting exigencies. However, There is no entry after 8 p.m. The River Cafe and Delegate Lounge will operate on extended hours during the week from 7 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. When contact groups are taking place, the Delegate Lounge will remain open until 11 p.m. for coffee and snacks. Please note that food is not allowed in the meeting rooms. Drinks may be brought in if they are in a container with a lid. Finally, dear delegates, as we come together again, I take this opportunity to remind participants of the code of conduct in place to prevent harassment at a UN system events. Based on this code of conduct, all UN system events are guided by ethical and professional standards, and all participants are expected to behave with integrity and respect toward everyone involved here at SABSTA 26. We look forward to your kind cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I would like now to propose the rapporteur of this meeting. After consultation with the Bureau, I propose Mr. Jean-Bruno Mikisa of Gabon as the rapporteur. Thank you very much. I invite Mr. Jean-Bruno Mikisa to take a seat at the podium. Before we go to the next item, I would like to suggest that in order to make efficient use of time and to allow more time for discussions, we refrain from making individual statements to thank or congratulate the chair, the host country, or the secretariat. Therefore, I would like to invite the rapporteur to make a statement of thanks on behalf of all the participants, so that this can be avoided in individual interventions. Mr. Jean-Bruno Mikisa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of all the participants at this meeting, I take this opportunity to congratulate the chair of the subsidiary body and members of the Bureau for their hard work in preparing for SABSTA 26, and I wish you the best of success for this meeting. On behalf of all of us, I thank the active executive secretary of the Secretariat and his team for the high-quality meeting document and logistical arrangement. I also thank Mrs. Inger Anderson and the UNEP staff for welcoming us to their headquarters, and those parties that have provided generous funding to facilitate the participation of representatives from developing countries. I have no doubt that our deliberation will be very productive. Thank you, Chair, for giving me this opportunity to speak on behalf of all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Bruno. This brings us to the adoption of agenda and organization of work. The Executive Secretary, in consultation with the Bureau, prepared a provisional agenda for this 26th meeting of SABSTA. The provisional agenda of SABSTA 26 is contained in document SABSTA/26-1 and the annotations to provisional agenda are contained in Substa 26/1/add1. I first submit the provisional agenda for adoption. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time that Brazil takes the floor, we take this opportunity to express our solidarity to the victims of Kenya due to the floodings over the recent weeks. Regarding Agenda Item 2, Brazil would like to draw attention to the significant number of intersessional activities that have taken place since COP15 and the informal activities and dialogues that are expected to take place over this week and the next one. We take note with deep concern of the multiplication of those activities which have placed a disproportionate burden on developing countries, many of which have small delegations and are unable to actively engage in the different peer review processes, online forums, or informal groups. Such a considerable number of intersessional activities are a reminder that we must be cautious when deciding on potentially new activities if we are to ensure the inclusivity and transparency of the work under this convention. We take this opportunity to stress that for this delegation, according to the rules of procedure, any intersessional activity must be mandated by a recommendation from the subsidiary bodies or a COP decision. We would also suggest avoiding as much as possible establishing overlapping contact groups to make sure that all countries are in a position to contribute to the discussions throughout this week. We are confident that with a constructive spirit, we'll be able to manage the work in an inclusive and transparent way, and in a manner that is not detrimental to the health and well-being of delegates. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brazil, for your statement. I don't see any other requests for the floor. So the agenda is adopted. Regarding the organization of work, the Secretariat, in consultation with the Bureau, proposes the allocation of tasks for the meeting as described in Annex 1 of annotated agenda in document Substa 26/1/add1. During this meeting, all sessions will be held in plenary. With this explanation, I submit organization of the work for approval. I don't see any request for the floor, so organization of the work is approved. Now we will proceed to the election of officers. I give the floor to Secretariat to explain how we will elect Bureau members. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Pursuant to Rule 26, Paragraph 3 of the Rules of Procedure, the Conference of the Parties, at the resumed second part of its 15th meeting, held here in Nairobi in October 2023, elected Ms. Senka Barudanovic from Bosnia and Herzegovina as chair of the subsidiary body for a term of office extending until the end of the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Following the elections at the 25th meeting of the subsidiary body, also held here in Nairobi in October 2023, the Bureau of the 26th meeting of the subsidiary body currently comprises the following members: Ms. Senka Barudanovic, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Chair. For the African states, Mr. Jean Bruno Mikisa from Gabon, Mr. Kenneth Wiseb from Namibia. For the Asia Pacific states is Mr. Bilal Tishat from Jordan, Mr. Jahidul Kabir from Bangladesh. For Eastern European states, Mr. Taulant Bino from Albania, Mr. Jan Plesnik from Czechia. For Latin American and Caribbean states, Ms. Aria St. Louis, Grenada, with Mr. Francis Reyes Polanco from Dominican Republic as substitute for the Nagoya Protocol. Ms. Raquel Hilianova Soto Torres from Peru. For Western European and other states, there's Ms. Marina von Weissenberg from Finland, Mr. Scott Wilson from Canada, with Ms. Jane Stratford from the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland as substitute for the Cartagena and Nagoya protocols. In order to have staggered terms of office within the Bureau, the subsidiary body will elect 5 new members to serve on the Bureau for a term commencing at the end of the present meeting and ending at the close of the 28th meeting. These new members will replace the outgoing members from Czechia, Finland, Gabon, Jordan, and Peru. In accordance with Rule 26, Paragraph 3 of the Rules of Procedure and Section C, Paragraph 10 of the Consolidated Modus Operandi of SAPSTA, a new chair is expected to be elected by the Conference of the Parties at this 16th meeting, which is scheduled to take place in October. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. In recent weeks, through the respective members of SAPSTA Bureau, regions were invited to coordinate within their respective regional groups to nominate new Bureau members and to ensure that selected candidates have the full support of their government and institution to dedicate time and travel to represent their respective region in the SAPSTA Bureau. It was also pointed out that as SAPSTA is being tasked to set the protocols, it is preferable if nominees to the SAPSTA Bureau are from party to all the 3 instruments of the Convention, the Cartagena Protocol and the Nagoya Protocol. Alternatively, and as provided for in the text of the protocols, if a nominee is from a country that is not party to one of the protocols, then the region should also nominate a substitute from a country that is party to the concerned protocol. It was emphasized that all regions should work internally to provide nominations and indicated that we would take up this item on this first session of the meeting. I now open the floor to the regions for their nominations. I would like to ask Czech Republic to speak on behalf of Eastern European states.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everybody, colleagues, friends, distinguished delegates. I would like to inform you that our region has been still consulting on the candidate, and we shall inform this distinguished body on the outputs as soon as possible. Thank you.
Now we would like to hear from Belgium on behalf of Western European and other states. Belgium, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, distinguished delegates. Second attempt. Thank you, Madam Chair, distinguished colleagues. We are still consulting to find a person to step in the shoes of Marina von Weissenberg, which will be a very difficult task for that person. But we will inform you as soon as we have more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Belgium. As there are no other requests for the floor, we shall return to, sorry. Grenada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to distinguished colleagues. With respect to election, on behalf of the Grulac region, we are delighted to present to you our candidate through an acclamation process. Our candidate is Ms. Paulina Stojas Salinas of Chile, and we have, because Chile as yet is not party to the protocols, we also have Ms. Ana Laura Melo of Uruguay as her alternate. Thank you very much.
I wish to thank GROG for their timely nomination. Senegal, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, the African Group has agreed to present Morocco to replace Mr. Jean Bruno by consensus. We have selected Mr. Mustafa Baoubi, who is a doctor in natural sciences and who is the focal point for the CBD for Morocco. Thank you.
Thank you. Bangladesh, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. From the Asia Pacific region, we are still on the process of consultation. So by the end of the day, I think we could send the name of our representative in the board. Thank you, sir.
I wish to thank all regions for timely nominations or for process of choosing the right candidate to continue in the Bureau. We shall return to the election of new members of the Bureau tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I encourage members of the Bureau to continue consultations with their respective regional groups before then, so they can be ready for their nominations tomorrow. Thank you. We will now proceed to the designation of chairs for our sessions. In my capacity of chair of this meeting, I have decided to request some assistance from my colleagues on the Substa Bureau. Mr. Jan Plesnik of Czech Republic and Ms. Marina Weissenberg of Finland for the chairing of this meeting of Substa. I will chair most of our plenary sessions, except for the first reading of item 5, synthetic biology, which will be chaired by Mr. Plesnik, and item 9, biodiversity and health, which will be chaired by Ms. Marina von Weissenberg. I will chair the remaining sessions, including the consideration of CRPs and L documents. Mr. Plesnik will support me during our consideration of issues related to the Nagoya Protocol. And with that, we have concluded agenda item 2 for this morning, noting that we must return to the election of officers tomorrow. We will now take up agenda item 3, monitoring framework for the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Many of you have heard about the work of ad hoc technical expert group on indicators at our workshop on 11th of May. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the co-chairs and members of the ATIG for their hard work and dedication. Now I would like to invite Secretariat to introduce the documents for this item. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. For this item, the Secretariat has prepared 2 pre-session documents that are shown on the slide, CBD/SAPSTA/26/2, the monitoring framework for the Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework is the name of the document, and there's an addendum to this, which is advice from the Ad Hoc Technical Expert Group on indicators for the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework on the wording of the binary indicators in the monitoring framework. These documents are accompanied by 9 information documents. The information document numbers are 11, 12, 13, 14, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. And there's also a number of reference documents. The Secretariat would like to note that there are a few editorial errors in the annexes to the recommendation, so in the annexes to the SAPSTA 26/2 document. There were changes to the complementary indicators proposed for target 18 that were lost. The TEG had proposed to delete the indicators that are shown in the complementary indicators column. Additionally, in the second annex, the organization leading the work under 18.1 and 18.2 is reversed, and the land tenure indicator for target 22 mistakenly appears in the cell for target 23. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. Before I open the floor for interventions, I would like to again thank the members of ATEG for their hard work and the information that has been provided in the documents mentioned by Secretariat. I would like to encourage you to keep your statements short and concise and to focus on the essential points. I will be limiting interventions to 5 minutes for parties speaking on behalf of regions, 3 minutes for individual parties, 4 minutes for IPLCs and major stakeholder groups, and 2 minutes for other governments and observers, time permitting. Please submit the full text to the Secretariat. Please note, however, that your key points, especially those that you would like to have reflected in the draft recommendations, should be read out in the room. Following interventions by observers, I will give a brief chance for parties that may wish to comment or support any specific proposal made by these organizations. This approach will be also followed during the review of CRPs at the later stage. I now open the floor for interventions on monitoring framework. Syrian Arab Republic, you have the floor, followed by Canada.
شكرا سيدة الرئيس.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to thank the Secretariat for the preparation of these documents. I also thank the group of experts for their efforts. This document, SAPSTA 26/2, the second paragraph, which entrusted SAPSTA to use the monitoring framework to revise the national plans as well as national reports to report on the progress achieved. Well, I would like to underscore collective effort and the preparation of plans. However, countries have not been able to devise and draft their national strategies and their 7th report because of the policy of Jeff towards these countries, including Syria. How this review could be collective, and there are countries that have not been given the right chance to obtain the adequate resources, and these countries are denied access to these resources. We all know that biodiversity is a universal and global issue. It's not only national. That's why we're all here meeting in this room. That's why, Madam Chair, we are asking you that the GEF and other donor countries give the possibility to our countries to have access to financing, and other countries that have also been denied access to resources, that we can do our job and that we can do our homework. Well, we know that this document underscores the fact that there is a dire need to build their capacities, and also underscores their need for funding to build these capacities. Thank you.
Thank you, Sia. Canada, you have the floor, followed by South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. Canada has consistently supported the adoption of the monitoring framework and the development of relevant indicators for the KMGBF to better assess global and party-level progress in delivering on the goals and targets. As such, Canada welcomes with great appreciation the work of the ATEG on the monitoring framework and the associated guidance document. Thank you so much for that tremendous work. Canada was very happy to work arm in arm with all of you at COP15 to adopt the monitoring framework. Its purpose is to provide a basic indication about progress in implementing the KMGBF and the resulting state of biodiversity. Now we need to move our effort towards implementing and how we are going to monitor and report on our effort. As a result, Canada believes that we should resist calls to reopen lengthy debate over indicators. We know that we will never have a 100% comprehensive package of headlines, indicators, and binary questions covering absolutely all elements of goals and target. We agreed at COP15 to move ahead with something that was good but not perfect. Canada wishes to work here to finalize technical detail related to the monitoring framework to ensure its operationalization, and we believe that the best use of time here is to focus effort and work on enabling the reporting on existing mandatory headline indicators by all countries and on adopting clear and concise binary indicator question, in particular for those goals and targets that do not have headline indicators, and specifically focusing on those not discussed at Substat 25, for example, target 1, 6, 12, and 15. We will submitting some specific view on this element. It is important in Canada's view to maintain the headline indicators agreed at COP15 at least until 2030 to ensure consistency in reporting at the global level. If parties feel strongly that current headline and global indicators may not fully capture the goal and target of the KMGBF and may not be suited to tracking progress for all parties, then Canada encourages parties to use component and complementary or their national indicators of their choice to fill the gap. Canada understands the need not to overburden the Secretariat and the CBD community with more work that ultimately does not add commensurate value for the implementation of the KMGBF, or that is likely to be unfeasible for parties to report against. As a result, we have views on how to have a clear, streamlined Substat 26 recommendation and draft COP15 decision that allow for specific moments in the future for improving the monitoring framework. We would avoid ongoing discussions that would simply create confusion for parties and others as we update our NBSAPs and start to think through the drafting of national reports, which are due in a not too distant future. We will provide
Canada,
a specific textual change in writing to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. South Africa, you have the floor, followed by Mexico.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa makes this statement on behalf of the Africa Group. Africa welcomes with appreciation the work conducted by the ad hoc technical expert group on indicators for the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and appreciates all the inputs made by different groups under the convention and relevant organization. We support the recommendation to the Conference of the Parties to adopt updates to the monitoring framework contained in Annex 1 to the present decision and reiterate paragraph 3 of decision 15/5 that decided to keep the monitoring framework under review as appropriate. Africa also notes that the monitoring framework provides a good basis to guide parties in terms of monitoring the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and the associated national biodiversity strategies and action plans. However, Africa would like to see the following reflected in the draft recommendations and in the revised annexes. Guidance and capacity building on indicators as NBSAPs are being developed and finalized. With regard to Goal C and Target 13, Africa would like to emphasize the recognition of the study conducted on the access and benefit sharing indicator, and that the new headline indicator for monetary benefit sharing that reads as follows: monetary benefits received in accordance with applicable internationally agreed access and benefit sharing instruments to enable both bilateral and multilateral system for access and benefit sharing to collectively report on monetary benefits across all international instruments. Elements on the amount of monetary and non-monetary benefits shared from the utilization of digital sequence information should also be reflected in the indicator. On Goal D, we welcome the headline indicator elements on resources. We request that further work be done on this to include technical and scientific cooperation and transfer of technology as an identified gap in Annex 3. A call for an institutional home for the headline indicators for Target 1 on spatial planning and Target 9 on sustainable use of wild species and benefits which are important and critical for further work for Africa. Africa suggests the development of an indicator that tracks the proportion of species in urgent need of recovery that have recovery plans in place and implementation actions underway for Target 4 in order to address gaps in the headline indicators. For headline indicator for Target 7, Africa takes note of the gap on plastic pollution as contained in Annex 3 of the monitoring framework. We request that the ATEC or the Executive Secretary to collaborate with relevant organizations to work on this indicator before the 17th Conference of the Parties. For Indicator 7.2, Africa welcomes the progress towards the development of this indicator and further requests that the Executive Secretary to continue to collaborate with food and agricultural organizations for further work on the operationalization of this indicator before the 7th Conference of the Party, the 17th. On Target 17, we note the limitation of biosafety experts with ATEC and request that the Executive Secretary to convene a meeting of the biosafety expert to further advise on the exact language of the binary questions for Target 17 for consideration on the by COP16 together with monitoring framework. Africa wishes to reiterate the importance of gender indicator and is also of the view that parties' efforts towards the implementation of gender plan of action at national level can serve as a measure to gender-responsive approaches, noting the pivotal role of women on conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity. Africa further proposed for an adoption of the traditional knowledge indicator on land tenure, a special headline indicator, following the extensive review that resulted in all requirements for headline indicator to be recovered. Furthermore, Africa has made a proposal on the text of the draft recommendation and ready to engage in further discussion of the contact group. I thank you.
Thank you very much, South Africa, on behalf of Africa. Mexico, you have the floor, followed by Belgium.
Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Mexico welcomes the work of the ad hoc expert group and congratulates them on the excellent work developed for the indicators and supports the work on the monitoring framework as set out in Annex 1, including heading indicators without change, the binary indicators without change, but with a few questions with regard to Add 1 document and some pending issues from Substa 25. Also the new column on possible disaggregation and indicators for updated components in line with that proposed by AHEG. Our delegation also agrees with taking note of the information presented in Annex 2 on the situation of headline indicators and consideration of Section C of the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in the implementation of the monitoring framework, and Annex 3 with the analysis of gaps in terms of research and innovation and development of indicators to improve the monitoring of the global framework. Now on recommendations to the Conference of the Parties, we have a few short comments on paragraphs 10 and 25 on the load, which would represent updating the indicators annually. Now on document Add 1, on the recommendations of ASEG on binary indicators, we also have a few brief comments with regards to questions on targets 6, 13, 20, 22, and 23. All of these comments will be sent to Secretariat in writing as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mexico. Belgium, you have the floor, followed by United Kingdom.
Yes, thank you very much, Mrs. Chair. Let me start by expressing the heartfelt support of Belgium to the people of Kenya following the recent catastrophic rains and floods. Belgium acknowledges the importance of a robust monitoring framework and very much appreciates the excellent work carried out by the ATEC on indicators and all the other expert groups involved. We particularly support the adoption at COP16 of the updates made to the monitoring framework to be able to measure progress towards the goals and targets of the GBF. We also support Annex 1 as proposed by the ATEC. We value the extensive guidance contained in document information 14 as it provides clarity on what is proposed for the headlines and binary indicators, including for their use at national level. Regarding the link with IPBES, we think the consideration of the gaps is to be referred to throughout all its works and not only for the fast-track assessments. We also ask for the different analysis conducted by the Executive Secretary referenced to in paragraph 23 of the draft recommendation to be made available to a Substa meeting prior to COP17. Belgium encourages the organization listed in Table 1 of Annex 2 to continue to work on the GBF indicators and to provide updates on this work to the Executive Secretary. Now regarding the binary indicators, we appreciate their added value to complement the set of indicators. For our work to be effective as possible during this meeting, we would like to ask the Secretariat to produce a non-paper based on combining Annex of Recommendations Substat 25/1 with the advice provided by the ATEC as contained in Add 1 for this meeting. This document would serve for the discussion during our contact group meetings. On this basis, we insist on solving the bracketed text to have a clean list of binary indicators and their associated questions and answers for adoption at COP16. Then, in order to have the outcomes of the Substat 26 reflected and integrated, we also highlight the need for some consolidation work on the binary indicators, both on Annex 1 and on IM 14, as well as on a full table of the binary indicators and their associated questions and answers. Belgium also has some editorial amendments or amendments to align language with previously agreed wording, notably on capacity building and development. We have submitted our amendments in writing. Thank you very much, Mrs. Chair.
Thank you, Belgium, very much. United Kingdom, you have the floor, followed by Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We commend the Artegon indicators on the remarkable work that it has undertaken to further operationalize the monitoring framework, and thank those groups whose work has fed into its recommendations. The UK was pleased to welcome the ARTEG to Cambridge in March this year for their second face-to-face meeting. ARTEG's works provides an excellent basis to inform our recommendation to COP. We support the statement made by Canada. We need to use the limited time we have here well and avoid opening ARTEG's recommendations for discussion. We suggest we can endorse Annex 1 as it is. We must not forget, we already adopted the monitoring framework at COP15. In this spirit, bear in mind, the changes to the names of the headline indicators are purely technical. The proposed disaggregations and the complementary and component indicators are optional. We note the information in Annexes 2 and 3 and also suggest these do not need to be discussed. On binary indicators, we must be pragmatic and avoid including additional text or questions. The indicators do not need to cover every single component of the target. We already had lengthy discussions at Substa 25 and should aim to resolve the many brackets and not add new ones. To facilitate our discussions, we propose that the Executive Secretary prepares one document which includes a list of binary indicators and questions as set out in the recommendations from Substa 25 and the advice from ARTEG. We broadly support the draft decision, but it is missing clear next steps on how further work on those headline indicators in the monitoring framework, which are in the lower categories of development, will be taken forward. It is also not clear what will be done with the outcomes of the review of implementation of the monitoring framework at COP17 and COP19. In our view, the purpose of the review of implementation of the monitoring framework at COP17 should be improving the guidance to support the implementation of the existing indicators in the monitoring framework. The purpose should not be adding new indicators 4 years before we agree new post-2030 global targets. We will propose our suggested amendments in writing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. Japan, you have the floor, followed by Argentina.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Japan would like to thank ARTEG members for their hard work. Japan would like to remind all of us that determining the indicators for each target took us multiple cuts. Taking into account these lessons learned, Japan believes that the discussion at this Substa should focus on finalizing the draft recommendations to adapt the monitoring framework at COP16 for the immediate implementation and measuring the progress effectively toward the goals and targets, rather than having prolonged discussions on the INF documents. On the other hand, INF 26/14 could be further polished by incorporating written submissions by parties. This guidance document will be a valuable asset when data sources and methodologies are further refined, while an extent and how the guidance will be utilized should be determined by each party based on their needs as appropriate. Additionally, we believe that the review of the monitoring framework in conjunction with the global review would be beneficial. Therefore, we are supportive of the draft COP16 decision proposed in the document Substa 26/2, para 22. This would help identifying gaps and assessing the effectiveness based on the reporting status of indicators for further updates in the future. Finally, we would like to have clarification of the status of Annex 1 and Annex 3 of the meeting document Substa 26/2 and how this will be further elaborated and refined based on the suggestions and submissions provided by parties. Japan will submit specific text proposals in writing. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Japan. Argentina, you have the floor, followed by Switzerland.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. Argentina reiterates its commitment to the implementation of the global framework and related decisions, including the monitoring framework. In this regard, Argentina highlights that the finalization of the monitoring framework forms part of the COP16 package. The package will be made up of the main topics to be considered by the COP, including decisions on DSI, resource mobilization, and the planning, monitoring, reporting, and review framework mechanism. A monitoring framework without sufficient resources to implement it in developing countries will be little more than words on the page. Argentina reiterates that it's essential that developed countries, provide financing, capacity building, and technology transfer necessary to create national information systems on biodiversity which are robust and reliable. Based on these general concepts, Argentina has a few proposals for amendments which we will summarize in the following 3 observations. First of all, Argentina believes it's necessary that the draft decision reflects the criteria of flexibility in the implementation of the monitoring framework, which the parties agreed on at COP15 in Montreal, in particular for developing countries. Secondly, Argentina can accept in some cases the recommendations of ATEG. In others, nevertheless, Argentina believes that it's necessary to make some changes. In particular, Argentina suggests continuing to revise Annexes 1 and 3 of the draft decision, and the list of binary indicators, as well as the methodologies proposed by ATEG as set out in document INF 14. Thirdly, Argentina insists on the fact that we need to include indicators on DSI. In this regard, we propose the preparation of options to include monitoring of the benefits derived from the multilateral mechanism of DSI for consideration of the working group on DSI. These proposals are not just technical adjustments. We believe they're essential to ensure a framework which is just, fair, and effective. We trust that these changes will be considered seriously by Substa. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Argentina. Switzerland, you have the floor, followed by Sweden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The monitoring framework for the KMGBF has been adopted by COP15 in Canada. It is now important to approve the technical updates that are needed in order to ensure that the monitoring framework, and in particular the headline and binary indicators, are ready to be reported on by parties for the 7th National Report. In the view of Switzerland, the draft recommendations contained important elements. However, we have to suggest some minor changes. With regard to the advice from the ATEC, Switzerland welcomes with appreciation the outcomes of its work and the inputs from other technical bodies such as the Technical Expert Group on Financial Reporting. Let us build on the work by the ATEC and use its guidance to make progress on this important topic. On paragraph 1, Switzerland agrees with the recommended adoption of the monitoring framework in Annex 1 by COP16. In this context, Switzerland welcomes the proposed metadata for headline indicators and binary indicators by the ATEC as contained in document IN 14 and notes the significant progress that has been achieved, in particular with regard to indicators for which an agreed up-to-date methodology did not exist at COP15. On paragraph 2, Madam Chair, and with regard to binary indicators, it is important that we make good progress here in Nairobi and prepare a solid recommendation to COP. Switzerland supports the advice by the ATEC on binary indicators as contained in Add 1. On paragraph 21, with regard to IPES, Switzerland suggests to invite IPES to consider the gaps described in Annex 3 not only in its assessments, but in its work in general. To conclude, Madam Chair, let us use the time here in Nairobi to make progress on the monitoring framework, including on the binary indicators based on the advice from the ATEC. To this end, let us be pragmatic, simple, and refrain from expanding the scope of the binary indicators further in order to enable COP16 to adopt the technical updates to the monitoring framework that are needed. We will hand in our suggested changes in writing. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. Sweden, you have the floor, followed by Morocco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sweden supports the view that the CBD should be striving towards a robust monitoring framework favoring a balance between simplicity and complete indicators with the aim of covering all key components of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework goals and action targets, as well as the principles and approaches described in Section C. Sweden welcomes with appreciation the work of the Arctic and the supporting expert groups. Sweden particularly appreciates the guidance on how to monitor the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework with a view to Section C and thanks the Arctic for their efforts on this topic. Sweden can support adopting the updated lists of headline, component, and complementary indicators in Annex 1 in document 26.2. We also would like to point out that several component and complementary indicators are relevant for multiple goals and targets. Sweden notes that Substar 25 had tasks the Arctic to also provide technical advice to fill critical gaps on elements of targets and goals not currently covered by any headline indicator. Sweden would like to seek clarity on how to identify gaps in Annex 2, 3, INF 14 and INF 19 will be addressed during the review of implementation of the monitoring framework at COP17. Further, Sweden is of the view that the CBD Secretariat needs a clear mandate to provide related recommendations to be considered by a Substar before COP17. Sweden will submit proposals on how to adjust the recommendation accordingly. Further, Sweden supports almost all proposals of the Arctic compiled in document 26.2 at 1, but we will submit a few proposals for adjustments for the list of binary indicators. Further, we will submit proposals on how to deal with some of the remaining brackets in the list of binary indicators, while we are flexible to resolve the other brackets. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Sweden, very much. Morocco, you have the floor, followed by Egypt.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. The Kingdom of Morocco would like to support a statement made by South Africa on behalf of the African Group. In addition, Morocco recognises the importance of the scientific and technical assessment in terms of the monitoring of the framework. Therefore, we welcome the results of the expert group and the assessment of the effectiveness of the monitoring framework in integrating national strategies for biodiversity in national reports or during the global assessment of progress on recommendations set out in the base document, CBD Substar 26.2. Morocco supports that set out, in particular the assessment and approval of the binary and headline indicators. We also insist upon the importance of developing a list of binary indicators and the questions and responses associated with them, taking into account the opinions of the expert group on those indicators. In addition, Morocco would like to highlight that the monitoring or follow-up indicators should all have a specific methodology with the calculation methodology, unity and period set out, as well as a classification in terms of the methodology and regularity of the production of indicators. These data will enable us to ensure coherence in the production of indicators between different countries and facilitate their comparability between countries and also with other indicators, such as those as the SDGs. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Morocco. Egypt, you have the floor, followed by Colombia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Egypt would like to support a statement given by South Africa on behalf of African Group, as well as the statement given by Morocco and other African statements as well that will be followed. Having said that, Madam Chair, we would like to thank you very, very much for the innovative idea of holding one-day information workshop, because most of us here with, as you said, more than 1,700 pages of documents were very difficult to follow, especially when you deal with very, very scientific work, and not all of us are scientifically minded. So we would like Secretariat to think of such innovative ways to deal with very complicated issues. So this is very, very important. Secondly, we think that this monitoring framework, although it is very crucial, without it, GBF would be nothing. But this workshop, as Argentina and Mexico said, very clear, without resources, we will not be able to implement them. At the same time, we are running out of time. Within few months from now, most of countries have to develop and submit to CBD Secretariat their MBSAP. And so we need capacity to develop national indicators in a way that we could see how can we implement the GBF properly. Madam Chair, we are really facing real problems, especially when we deal with some issues that are not technical. For example, the statement given by our colleague from Syria, which shows some political conflict. We don't need such things. That's why I have been trying for some time to call for a new indicator if it's possible, or maybe a long-term indicator. We call it ethical indicator. These biodiversity resources are God creations, and they are well documented in all of our traditional knowledge, in all our religions, and we have many, many examples, good one and bad one. Bad one, it resulted in deteriorating or damaging our ecosystems. Good one, if you think about Prophet Noah and his journey, the significance of this is survival of the species. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Egypt, very much. Colombia, you have the floor, followed by Brazil.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of Colombia, we would like to welcome the organisation of this substantive meeting and assure that discussions this week will form the technical and scientific basis for the decisions which we hope to take at COP16, which will be held in Cali, Colombia, next October. We'd also like to thank in particular the work carried out by the ad hoc technical expert group. Now on item 3 of the agenda, on the monitoring framework, we believe this is essential to monitor the targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Colombia would like to reiterate its commitments with the process of updating the Biodiversity Action Plan, which has enabled us to discuss in detail each and every one of the targets and indicators, the headline ones, with the different sectors of the government, but also with non-state actors, such as the private sector, academia, and communities, among others, in striving to find ambitious commitments together which are realistic and measurable, through indicators which will be fed into by different sources of information, both public and non-state. The indicators will be the most effective way to measure the implementation of the framework. Therefore, their rigorous and adequate definition will be key in the process to update the NBSAPs and in terms of the scope and targets and objectives of the framework. In this process, we support the proposal by Canada to focus on the implementation of already adopted indicators. In this process, we have confirmed that it's very important to take into account national circumstances and capacities in the implementation of the indicators. It's essential that we promote the strengthening of countries' own capacities, technology transfer for capacity building, focused on having the tools and mechanisms necessary to promote the implementation of the framework. We need to work on the identification of gaps and needs in order to meet the indicators set out by 2026, 2028 and 2030. In addition, Colombia believes that the monitoring framework should be compatible with the frameworks implemented by other environmental international instruments in order to avoid the duplication of information. We have some more detailed comments on recommendations and the annexes, which will be sent to the Secretariat in writing, and we are ready to take part in the negotiating group, which will be defined in order to go into detail on this important topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colombia. Brazil, you have the floor, followed by Russian Federation.
Thank you, Chair. And on Brazil's position during subset 25, we take note with deep concern that many are not consistent with the agreed language under COP15, and they introduce concepts that have not been agreed upon under the goals and targets of the KM-GPF. Regarding the draft decision and the updated monitoring framework in subset/26/2, Brazil understands that national information and monitoring systems remain the primary source of information to support the national reports and the implementation of the monitoring framework. Our efforts to improve the monitoring framework should not undermine the policy space of countries to identify methodologies and classification systems that are more suitable to national priorities and should not impose additional reporting burden. Due to those concerns, we're not convinced of the added value of the activities being proposed under paragraph 23 of the draft decision and of the need to undertake further methodological work as suggested by Annex 2 before the submission of the 7th National Report. Furthermore, Brazil would not be in a position to accept the use of the IUCN Global Ecosystem Typology to monitor goals A and B and targets 2, 3, and 12, as countries have developed their own monitoring methodologies to assess ecosystem area. With regards to Target 9, additional emphasis is needed to understand the persistent levels of poverty and food insecurity across biodiversity-dependent communities. Regarding Target 15, we would prefer retaining the indicator from the SD framework on sustainability reporting as a component indicator. We know that TFND has been developed by a limited number of organizations, and therefore it does not resonate with a variety of business scales, types, and operations. With regards to Target 18, we know that the definitions of subsidies and incentives under OECD may not be consistent with some definitions agreed upon under the World Trade Organization, thus require further discussions to ensure coherence with relevant international obligations. Similar concerns would also apply to the concepts of biodiversity-relevant fees, taxes, and charges, the indicator on global environmental impacts of consumption, and sustainable commodities, which must not pave the way for trade distortive policies or measures or endorse certification schemes. Brazil would agree with the way forward to use the binary indicators as headline indicators for targets 8, 14, and 17, given the challenges to identify specific quantitative metrics. We reiterate that the binary indicators should reflect in a balanced manner the different components of each target. Finally, Brazil is not in a position to accept the proposal to establish a global biodiversity observance system. Given the uneven distribution of capacities to collect and generate biodiversity-relevant data between developed and developing countries, we fear that establishing a single system may aggravate the asymmetries amongst countries. Our efforts should prioritize strengthening existing national and regional information and monitoring systems and ensuring equity in the capacities for data collection and generation. We'll be submitting a significant number of written amendments in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Russian Federation, you have the floor, followed by Cuba.
Добрый день.
Good morning. Madam Chair, the Russian Federation has noted with satisfaction the very fruitful work which has been carried out by the technical expert group on the indicators on preparing a renewed monitoring mechanism and further work on what was presented in Annex 1. I'm referring to the indicators. Mindful of the concrete comments and proposals which were proposed in writing to the Secretariat for inclusion into the text of the recommendation, as well as the various indicators, we agree that we should recommend to the 16th Conference of the Parties to adopt the updated indicators for the monitoring mechanism which had been proposed in Annex 1, including all types of indicators. And of course, we stand ready to participate in discussions on concrete specific sources in developing states, something which was touched upon by a number of speakers before me. This also applies to countries with economies in transition. As a result of this, there is an incomplete picture. We would like to point to the need for the verification of global data at national levels. For the use of indicators in the preparation of national reports, priority regarding the use of global data methods should be granted to the results of monitoring at national levels with the use of national methodologies. We back the necessity for coordination and cooperation with the support of the various parties and strengthening national monitoring systems and carrying out national and regional assessments regarding recommendations 15. We agree with what was said by Syria, and we do not agree with constraints of a political nature when it comes to access to the data of the Global Environmental Fund. This is not in keeping with the objectives of this mechanism. And this is why in paragraph 15, where it refers to providing resources to states, we would like to add the word all states. And concerning item 18, the provision of resources must be carried out with regular certification at national levels. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Russian Federation. Cuba, you have the floor, followed by Sudan.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, our delegation would like to thank all of the expert groups for their work, which has notably contributed to setting out the monitoring framework for the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. As a general comment, we support the updated monitoring framework, but would like to highlight that to add to the assessment of the main indicators at national level, we need the creation of capacity, technology transfer, and strengthening of national monitoring systems. For some of the headline indicators, given their complexity, it will be difficult to assess in 2 times in just 6 years, and to present the 7th and 8th national reports to the Convention. One example of this is the global typology of ecosystems. Now, on questions in annexes, we support the recommendation of the expert group to change the text of the responses and have some minor recommendations in the drafting of the binary indicators for the monitoring framework, in the sense that we believe that the questions set out need to be as concrete as possible and result-oriented. We will send you, of course, all of these in writing. On the use of indicators in the monitoring framework, including metadata and the implementation of Section 6 of the framework, we reiterate that in the national reporting processes, we need to maintain the fact that the predetermined option for parties is based on national information, although it can use globally available data. In addition, on the affectation of national data under the global typology of ecosystems, for countries such as Cuba, we will require support to develop new classifications and maps at national level, or to use other sources of data. For level 3 of the typology, this has more than 80 functional groups of ecosystems, so that's a huge work for developing countries which need to take on this methodology and carry out assessments at national level. We understand the benefits of using this typology, but we shouldn't deviate from the objectives as set out. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Cuba. Sudan, you have the floor, followed by Seychelles.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Sudan would like to thank the Secretariat for the preparation of the documents of the meeting. We should like to thank the ad hoc technical expert group on the framework indicators for their efforts, as well as the great work in the framework of monitoring. We also appreciate the inputs of other groups within the framework of the Convention to support the monitoring framework. Sudan should like to support the South African statements on behalf of the African group regarding the approval of the monitoring framework of its importance in measuring the size of the achievement. However, more work should be done regarding the monitoring framework as well as the indicators in order to assess and measure the effectiveness of the implementation. There are a lot of gaps with regard to the framework. In section C, which is really very important, there are gaps that will not be covered by the monitoring framework. There are also other targets, especially target number 17 regarding biosafety, being a new target in the global framework. Therefore, we should work in order to develop all the methodology and to build the capacities as well as to provide funding in order to implement the monitoring framework. Many countries are in an advanced stage regarding the development of strategies as well as national plans. Those countries are developing the national indicators. However, we have the challenge of time. But we are going to be faced by another challenge while reporting the implementation status. Therefore, we need more guidance in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sudan. Seychelles, you have the floor, followed by Malaysia.
Thank you, Chair. Seychelles is delivering this statement on behalf of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, which is the most prominent intergovernmental grouping of ambitious countries on nature action, with, as of today, 118 members and engages with over 40 organizations. At COP15, a dedicated secretariat was created with the aim of directly supporting in the implementation of the 30 by 30 target. The Hague Secretariat has been working on strengthening political mobilization, building capacities for its members, including to the 30 by 30 Solutions Toolkit, and providing the 30 by 30 matchmaking platform to connect its members' technical and financial needs with entities that can provide support. Bearing in mind the important component of quality which the Hague has consistently emphasized, while advocating for the 30 by 30 target, the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People welcomed the 5 disaggregated components. We also encourage other parties not to propose any additional disaggregated components due to time constraints and aware that we need to discuss all targets of the KMGBF. We urge the finalization of the adequate methodology concerning coverage by protected areas and OECMs with different levels of effectiveness for countries to start reporting and monitoring on possible disaggregated components as suggested by the ATEG, considering their national circumstances. In this light, we strongly encourage countries to further engage with UNEP, WCMC. The High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People will aim at providing adequate arenas and support for countries to report and monitor Target 3. We have less than 6 years to act, and we need to be as efficient and swift in adopting the indicators that will serve as a basis for the years to come. The High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People remains committed to supporting governments in reaching the protection of at least 30% of the planet's land and of the ocean by 2030. Just to add some points from our national perspective, we support the COP recommendation for the adoption of the update to the monitoring framework, noting that it serves as a good basis for countries for monitoring the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. However, we take note, especially on the gaps identified in Annex 3, for the headline indicator under Target 6, on the eradication and control of invasive alien species, on priority sites such as islands, and for headline indicator for Target 7, on the gaps and on plastic pollution, and encourages further work to address those gaps. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Seychelles. Malaysia, you have the floor, followed by New Zealand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Malaysia has reviewed the proposed indicators for the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, or KMGBF, as contained in Annex 1 of the document, and would like to express our gratitude to the ad hoc technical expert group of ATEC on indicators for the KMGBF for their work. Malaysia believes that the majority of the proposed indicators strike a balance between monitoring global progress and being practical at the national level. Taking into account national circumstances, priorities, and capabilities, Malaysia has incorporated some of the indicators into its biodiversity strategies and action plans, also known as the National Policy on Biological Diversity, 2022 until 2030. Malaysia launched the policy on 24 October 2023 and is currently developing a national online reporting system to align with the online reporting tool. With regard to resource mobilization, Malaysia feels that follow-up work is necessary for parties to utilize financial resources from all sources, including the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, or GBFF, to operationalize some of the more tenuous targets and goals, such as Target 19. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Malaysia, very much. New Zealand, you have the floor, followed by Costa Rica.
Thank you, Madam Chair. New Zealand considers our priority here at SBSTA 26 is to finalize the headline indicator disaggregations and binary indicators of the monitoring framework. This is crucial to ensuring the effective and timely operationalization of the GBF monitoring framework at COP16 so that parties can start to implement it and start tracking their progress towards the global goals and targets. New Zealand agrees with others that the RTAG has done a fantastic job and that we now have the information we need to start implementing the monitoring framework. To make the best use of our limited time here at SBSTA, New Zealand suggests we should focus our work on the following critical tasks. Firstly, we should adopt all of the technical updates suggested by the RTAG, including to the titles of the headline indicators and the binary indicator questions and answers. Secondly, we should adopt a streamlined and efficient process to cleaning up the wording of the binary questions, where brackets or significant issues remain. We suggest this is done by asking the co-chairs to produce a new, clean version based on a synthesis of the text edits submitted by parties. For example, New Zealand proposes to submit edits to the binary indicator questions on Targets 1 to address the loss of high-value areas, and on Target 8 to more closely reflect the elements of that targets. This approach should enable us to quickly produce a clean version, which hopefully we can all agree to accept. Thirdly, we should confirm the headline indicator disaggregations, which should be our highest priority here at SBSTA. We think we could go through them in a fairly rapid way, for example, where we confirm all of the RTAG's proposed disaggregations, except where there are specific concerns raised by parties. Like others, New Zealand has identified a small number of areas where the RTAG's proposed headline indicator disaggregations could be significantly improved. For example, if time permits, New Zealand would suggest that on Target 3 on protected areas, headline indicator 3.1, coverage of protected areas, is also disaggregated by IUCN protected area type, which is critical to ensuring biodiversity outcomes. Finally, we should ensure that the SBSTA has the opportunity to review a list of potential future updates, for example, where the RTAG has identified some clear fixes to significant gaps in the headline and component indicators, and where a suitable and available solution already exists or is already in train. This could involve asking the Secretariat to synthesize these future updates so they can be captured in a list of updates for future consideration. While our work here at SBSTA has real potential to add value to the monitoring framework, none of this work I've outlined above should delay our implementation of the current headline indicators which have already been adopted. New Zealand is committed to the timely completion of the GBF monitoring framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Costa Rica, you have the floor, followed by Finland.
Thank you very much, Chair. On agenda item 3, Costa Rica welcomes document SBSTA/26/2 and recognises the hard work carried out by the ad hoc technical expert group on indicators. They made important progress on the monitoring framework for the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Nevertheless, it's also important to recognise that much work remains to be done to ensure that the monitoring framework is functional in terms of efficiency and effectiveness for the parties. Despite the efforts made, there are still 4 targets which do not have indicators or headline indicators. Therefore, for the moment, we don't have a way to measure and report on progress on topics as important as those such as integration of biodiversity in other productive sectors, sustainable consumption, full representation and participation, and equitable, inclusive, effective participation, including gender perspectives and the perspective of Indigenous peoples and local communities in decision making, and the progress in ensuring gender equality in the implementation of the diversity framework. Given the urgency of having these indicators available and in line with Decision 15.4 of the UN General Assembly, we recommend using the following indicators developed for the monitoring of the Sustainable Development Goals. Indicator 12.2.1, material footprint in absolute terms, material footprint per capita, and material footprint per GDP for target 16. Indicator 1.4.2, proportion of total adult population with secure tenure rights to land, A, with legally recognized documentation, and B, who perceive their rights to land as secure by sex and type of tenure for target 22, and indicators 5A1 and 5A2, which refer specifically to target 23. In addition, we want to bring attention to the fact that the proposed system for multiple questions on level of progress don't include the option of in development or developing, which is set out in the unique responses. This has a direct impact on the final disaggregation of the indicators, restricting countries, in particular developing countries, and not allowing them to report progress, even if it's meeting some of the aspects of the questions. Thank you.
Costa Rica, thank you. Finland, you have the floor, followed by Uruguay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Finland thanks the outstanding work done by the ARTEC. This is a major step forward. Finland supports endorsing the updates to the monitoring framework as contained in Annex 1 of the draft recommendation. We also support the amendments to the binary indicators as suggested by the ARTEC in Add 1, as well as ARTEC's advice on streamlining the answering options and summing up answers from multiple choice questions. Not all the binary indicators were discussed at Substat 25. The 4 indicators mentioned in the Substat 24 report should be worked on at this meeting. Taking the work of the ARTEC as a starting point, we should aim at removing the remaining brackets from the binary indicators. Finland supports including the relevant sectors in the binary indicator related to target 14, and we also have proposals for the binary indicators on targets 8, 13, and 17. We welcome the gap analysis provided in 19, and we need to work on all the identified gaps. However, if one indicator should be singled out as the most urgent to develop, Finland thinks it's 1.1 on spatial planning, as this holds great potential for tackling biodiversity, the biodiversity challenge at large scales. We hope that the work of IPES will help us in this regard. Additionally, we thank the work of the Global Framework on Chemicals and recommend using the indicators provided. Further work on the headline indicators, especially those with identified gaps, should be carried out right after this meeting. How this is done, possibly by extending the mandate of the ARTEC, or, for example, by establishing smaller thematic expert groups to tackle the most urgent issues, remains an open question, and we are happy to consider any options. We have submitted our text proposals in writing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Finland. Uruguay, you have the floor, followed by Democratic Republic of Congo.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. Uruguay would like to thank the ad hoc technical expert group for their valuable work on indicators for the global framework. The work they have conducted is a key contribution in context of updating national biodiversity strategies. From analysing the reports as a whole, we can see that we faced an ambitious monitoring framework, but which presents challenges for many parties, in particular for developing countries. In this regard, we reiterate the need for commitments related to implementation of the monitoring framework be accompanied by commitments in terms of resource mobilization and a strengthening of scientific, technical and technological cooperation. On the draft decision for the COP, we believe that future work should focus mainly on the headline and binary indicators, as well as in defining precisely the needs and categories for their disaggregation. In relation to guidelines on the monitoring framework, given the length of the document, which we couldn't review as a whole, we suggest take notes of instead of welcomes. We understand the importance of adopting a unique system for the classification of ecosystems. Nevertheless, we request that for the moment, the proposal to use level 3 of the global ecosystems typology of the IUCN is maintained in brackets at the national level to ensure that each party can generate and manage its own data. At present, we aren't able to do this and to move forwards in the proposal of creating a global observation system. Thank you.
Thank you, Uruguay. Democratic Republic of Congo, followed by Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for having afforded me the floor. The DRC wishes to back the statement made by South Africa on behalf of the African Group. Madam Chair, in our statement, we will include a number of questions, ones which we will expect answers to. Now, the DRC is extremely concerned by this major delay or the late availability of working documents for this meeting of Substa 26. This violates Rule 10 of our Rules of Procedure, and clear explanations will have to be provided to us to ensure that such events do not become generalized in the future. Now, the working document which we are considering is, from our point of view, the very cornerstone for the success of the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Unfortunately, we did not have the necessary time to consider it in detail. Praiseworthy work has been carried out in terms of developing indicators, but having said that, major gaps remain, and these will need to be filled. Now, we would like to know how these gaps are going to be filled and how to prioritize our work to ensure that we have a comprehensive monitoring framework. There is a tautological problem in certain case as a result of lack of data and so forth. Objectives C and D, targets 1, 9, and 19 are especially relevant here. How are we going to obtain the necessary data to develop relevant indicators? Now, work on the global monitoring framework, it's not been completed yet, and the mandate of the technical expert groups, however, is about to end. So the question is, how are we going to continue our work? We have to complete this work to be able to finalize the updating of our strategies and national action plans in the field of biodiversity. We've also noted a lack of experts regarding questions related to the digital sequencing of biological resources and so forth. Decision 5 has also asked the Secretariat to develop guidelines regarding the use of indicators. Where are we right now in terms of this? And finally, the effective implementation of the Global Diversity Framework requires a change of approach when it comes to capacity building, technical and scientific cooperation, technology transfer, and the sharing of information, amongst many others. For without this, the global framework will be nothing more than a collection of good intentions. And by way of conclusion, we would like to know what methodology you have planned to adopt to develop existing indicators, because the indicators are contained in 400 pages and we need to reduce this to ensure that we have an easily implementable framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Côte d'Ivoire, followed by Spain. followed by Turkey, and then Spain.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you for having given me the floor. Côte d'Ivoire would like to start by lending its full support to the people of Kenya following the recent natural disasters. Madam Chair. Côte d'Ivoire wishes to back the position voiced by South Africa on behalf of the African group. And I would add to this the DRC, especially their comment regarding the time which was made available to us to study these documents and make comments on them. Côte d'Ivoire would like to congratulate and praise the work of the group of experts regarding the monitoring framework on the GBF. It's indicator-based, and this is something that we back. We also back the recommendation regarding the consideration and updating of the list of indicators on an annual basis. We also like to focus on the availability of resources to assist developing states in meeting the challenges in this field. Madam Chair, this document of the monitoring framework contains a number of targets that do not have relevant indicators. Indicators which are excessively technical will need to be further simplified because not parties possess the necessary capabilities and capacities and the same tools when it comes to assessment and monitoring and evaluation. We are currently wondering what really happened for us to have reached this stage. Is this an issue of expertise or availability of data? Now, on this issue, the question is, how are we going to solve this? And how much time are we going to take to meet these concerns and challenges? These questions, Madam Chair, are ones which the group of experts needs to look at. We believe that the work that has already been carried out is substantial progress, which needs to be built on. And this is why Côte d'Ivoire backs the idea of having the group of experts continue its work, even if we need to strengthen it to enable it to tackle all of these issues. The challenge before us now is that of timing. For the indicators are expected at all national levels, at a global level, and it'll also be necessary to complement available data and strengthen the process at national levels through the monitoring and follow-up of our strategies. I thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Côte d'Ivoire. Turkey, you have the floor, followed by Spain.
Thank you, Chair. Turkey supports the monitoring of the framework and appreciate the efforts of expert groups. However, the shortcomings in the indicators of GBF pose a significant challenge as we worked on the documents, mainly the annexes. The GBF provides a comprehensive framework for the conservation of biodiversity. However, for this framework to be effectively implemented and successful, it is crucial that the indicators defined are accurately identified and measured. We appreciate the most binary headline indicators, but unfortunately we find some of them, as well as defining the segregations and the component indicators and so forth, to be not fully reflective, lack of data, uncertain, and hence challenging to achieve the goals and targets, both globally and nationally. As we witness an increasing loss of biodiversity, it is worth discussing the significance of our insistence on some impracticalities of the GBF indicators, especially nationally. We believe that for many states, these indicators might fail to adequately reflect the complexity of the biodiversity, which may hinder efforts towards environmental sustainability. Therefore, it is essential to develop and implement more effective, comprehensive, and accurate criteria and indicators for the conservation of biodiversity. Within this framework, environmental policies and practices should be created with a participatory approach that takes into account the complexity and dynamics of natural systems and considering applicability of these indicators nationally. For instance, the indicators used to monitor biodiversity conservation and species extinction often lack specificity and fail to fully reflect the current situation. Additionally, there is a need for some comprehensive and integrated indicators that take into account significant factors such as habitat loss, climate change, and human impacts. Turkey gave its recommendations during working group meetings, and we have still comments and proposed indicators on goals, for example, ABD and targets 1, 4, and 13, and so on. And to make good use of time, they will be shared with the Secretariat. As Turkey, we are committed to identifying and addressing the shortcomings and inadequacies of the indicators set by GBF. In this regard, strengthening international cooperation and capacity building will be crucial steps towards enhancing and empowering the indicators of GBF, not only at global level, but also at national level, while preparing the reports and NAPSAPs. Hence, their national representations should also be important. Thank you.
Thank you, Turkey. Spain, you have the floor, followed by Netherlands.
Thank you very much, Chair. Spain would like to thank the Secretariat for the documents prepared, and in particular appreciate the excellent work carried out by the ad hoc technical expert group on indicators in order to add to the monitoring framework, and for any other groups and experts who have contributed to this task. We also appreciate the comprehensive and useful guidelines contained in document INT 14, which provides clarity on the proposal for headline and binary indicators, in particular for their use at the national level. Spain believes that it's essential to have an adequate monitoring framework in order to measure progress made towards the objectives and targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Therefore, we support the fact that Substa 26 submit to COP16 the documents and recommendations needed to consolidate the updating of the monitoring framework already adopted at COP15. For this, we believe that we need to work in a constructive and effective manner to resolve the pending issues in the annex of recommendation Substa 25.1, taking into account the valuable assessment provided by the ATEG of the indicators, as set out in document Substa/26/2/add1, which we agree with mostly. In this regard, we have some proposals for new wording in order to resolve some pending issues when it comes to the wording in particular of the binary indicators in the recommendation, and we have sent those in writing. Finally, we would like to suggest some amendments to the text of recommendation on a decision to be adopted by the COP, which we have also sent in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Spain. Netherlands, you have the floor, followed by Minamata.
Dear Chair, distinguished delegates, since this is the first time the Netherlands is taking the floor, we would like to express our solidarity with those affected by the floodings in Kenya, Brazil, and other countries. Regarding the monitoring framework, first, the Netherlands welcomes the hard work of the ATEC on indicators within the intersessional period. In particular, the work that has been done on the methodologies for both the headline and binary indicators and the guidance related to the needs to implement the monitoring framework. Second, the Netherlands would like to support the opening statement of Belgium. The Netherlands considers it to be crucial to adopt a list of binary indicators at COP16. Therefore, we believe that our primary focus during Substa should be to finalize the list of binary indicators in order to adopt these at COP to ensure that these will be ready before parties are expected to start the work on the national reports. When finalizing the binary indicators, it is essential to be pragmatic, with the ultimate goal of creating a monitoring framework that is both robust and implementable. The Netherlands, therefore, welcomes the advice of the ATEC on the wording of the binary questions. Regarding the binary indicators, we will submit our comments in writing regarding how essential for consistent reporting and timely aggregation of the results in the global review. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Netherlands. Sorry for mistake. Australia, you have the floor, followed by France. Australia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Australia views the monitoring framework as an important instrument to track progress in implementing the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and to informing the development of parties' own MBSABs. We note the monitoring framework was adopted at COP15 and we appreciate the RTEG's work to date to further progress the operationalisation of the framework that we, as the COP, tasked them with. Whilst Australia does not view binary indicators as a replacement for headline indicators, we do appreciate that in the absence of headline indicators, the binary indicators will collect additional information that may assist in telling the story of the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Australia would seek to avoid changing the purpose or intent to the experts' work on the binary indicators and thanks them for their updates since Substa 25. Australia's preference is not to discuss each binary indicator in detail, but support the drafting of these indicators as proposed by the experts of the RTEG, including their subsequent recommendations following Substa 25. We do note, however, that the RTEG's recommendations do not address all the remaining bracketed text from Substa 25, and these will need to be resolved. We would encourage parties to be pragmatic in resolving these brackets. However, should the binary indicators be opened up for discussion, Australia will provide written comments on binary indicators for targets 8, 14, 17, 22 and 23. Australia appreciates that further methodological work is needed on a number of the headline indicators. Greater clarity regarding how and when peer review would occur as the headline indicator methodologies progress would be appreciated, especially with respect to headline indicators 1.1 and 9.1, which do not yet have a methodology. Thank you.
Thank you, Australia. France, you have the floor, followed by Madagascar.
Merci. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm going to speak French, and I'm going to start by conveying our solidarity to the people of Kenya for the flooding that the country has just experienced. Now, regarding the monitoring framework, France fully backs the statement made by Belgium. To achieve a solid and final monitoring framework, we have to update all of the different elements of document 1. We also have to send a clear list of binary indicators for adoption by COP16. To this end, we back the adoption of an effective and pragmatic method to resolve remaining brackets be applied and to align the terminology of binary indicators and associated issues with those of the targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework. We also hear the calls by the various parties in terms of capacity building for monitoring. This is a key element for implementing the framework. In this respect, we would like to thank ATEC on the indicators for the publication of the information documents and the organization of webinars and press statements on their work. These are very important initiatives to enable the parties to better understand the monitoring framework. We consider that all of the work and guidelines of ATEC should be provided or included on the reporting platform in a clear way to back the parties in terms of their reporting activities. We also note the usefulness on the information contained in document 14 to better incorporate the stakes of objective 14. We encourage the parties able to do so to report on possible disaggregation proposed by ATEC. And finally, we would like to underscore the importance of the elements of the monitoring framework which are subject to voluntary reporting, such as the complementary indicators for the monitoring of the follow-up of the global framework as a whole. We encourage the states able to do so to use these indicators in their national reports and to use methodological information provided on the GBF fund. Our proposals for specific amendments will be submitted in writing, and we'd like to thank the Chair for having afforded us the floor to make these comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. Madagascar, you have the floor.
Sorry, Madam Chair, Madagascar did not request for the floor. It was Malawi, so probably maybe it's a technical error.
Thank you, Malawi. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Malawi would like to support the statement that was made by South Africa on behalf of Africa and appreciates the hard work that the ATEC has undertaken to advance work on the monitoring framework. We welcome the draft recommendations to adopt the updates to the monitoring framework with its gaps, as noted in paragraphs 3 and 5, noting that work will continue to address these gaps through decision 15/5 that decided to keep the monitoring framework under review. With regards to target 13 and goal C, Malawi welcomes the outcomes of the study on access and benefit sharing indicators, which is really helpful in providing information on indicators that are useful for both the national and global level. With regards to Annex 3 on the gap analysis, we feel that the analysis on target 13 does not reflect the outcomes of the study and does not reflect decision 15/9 on digital sequence information on genetic resources, and hence support the proposal made by South Africa earlier on, and also recommend that the list of possible indicators presented in the study should be considered to address DSI issues and the gaps identified. We support paragraph 23 of the draft recommendations, but call on a party-led forum to support this process. But considering also the timely availability of indicators for the development of NBSAPs and in the reporting progress of implementation, we recognize that there has to be a cut-off point in the development of indicators if they are to be useful for the processes, and this should be supported with capacity and financial resources to aid their uptake and use. And hence, we welcome paragraphs 15 and 20 of the draft recommendations in this regard. To address the issue of timing, we have made minor edits to paragraph 23b with an emphasis that the update should focus only on closing the gaps identified by the ATEC. Finally, with regards to indicators for target 23, we would like to support an indicator on the national implementation of the Gender Plan of Action, as was mentioned earlier by others, and have provided language for this binary indicator and will be submitted. Otherwise, Malawi joins the positive spirit in the room that has placed high importance on this agenda item and is ready to work with others in advancing progress on this agenda item. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Malawi. Jordan, you have the floor, followed by European Union.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the outset, I would like to wholeheartedly thank the Secretariat as well as the working group for all the efforts that they have made to prepare the documents of the meeting. We also would like to express our solidarity with the Kenyan government and people over the floods that have stricken the country and over the loss in life. And I think we need to take action in the implementation of the monitoring framework. This also will support the implementation of the coming Montreal Protocol. We think that this document will contribute positively to the implementation of the coming Montreal Protocol. We're looking forward to accelerating the measures adopted to implement the protocol and to take action concerning the implementation of national plans on the basis of meeting their needs in funding. We think that this will contribute to fostering the efforts by the working group and identify the issues to be tackled. Madam Chair, we need to take into consideration the challenges facing by developing countries in their national reports and their reporting, and to provide funding to these countries. And I would like to align myself with the statement of the Syrian Arab Republic in this connection. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jordan. European Union, you have the floor, followed by Germany.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The European Union strongly supports a robust monitoring framework for the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and we highly appreciate the excellent work carried out by the ATEC and its expert groups, in particular the methodological guidance provided to parties for domestic use in INF 14, and all this with severe time constraints and to further operationalize the monitoring framework. We believe it's important to have clarity on the further process on operationalization of the monitoring framework, and we will propose amendments to the draft recommendation in that regard, focusing on 4 main points. First, we support the review of the implementation of the monitoring framework to be done in conjunction with the global review of collective progress in the implementation of the GBF, and this review should be done in an efficient manner and therefore in close collaboration with the ad hoc scientific and technical informal advisory group to be considered next week under SBI Agenda reporting and review. The scope of the review of the implementation of the monitoring framework should consider the lessons learned from the implementation of the monitoring framework on scientific and technical needs to support the implementation of the GBF. Finally, we would request the Executive Secretary to work with the Global Knowledge Support Service for Biodiversity on all these tasks. We see the value of the binary indicators and the importance of finalizing the work on this here at Substa 26. We can support most improvement from ATEC in AD1 and are confident that Substa will provide a clean list of binary indicators for adoption at COP16. We support the statements made by Belgium and we will provide our proposed amendments in writing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, European Union. Germany, you have the floor, followed by Indonesia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Germany would like to thank the Secretariat and the ARTEC for the work during the intersessional period. Okay. Germany supports the statement made by Belgium and wants to highlight the need for a non-paper based on the combination of the annex of recommendation Substa 25.1 with the advice provided by ARTEC as contained in the AD1, which we highly value. To use this document, a combined document, as a basis in the contact group meetings would, from our view, facilitate the discussions on binary indicators as to resolve the brackets. In this sense, we join many others wishing to get out of this meeting with a clean list of binary indicators. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, German. Indonesia, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Indonesia is on the process of completing of the NSB using the indicators descriptions designed by COP15 CBD. Indonesia has also developed national priorities in accordance to its interest for its target and headline of indicator of the framework. Madam Chair, in our delegation views, there is another terms that we need to take into considerations, namely difference capacity from member states, capacity, especially the starting point at several indicators. Due to this capacity conference, the indicator of achievement will be different in various countries. We are in the view that Secretariat should take into a careful consideration in conducting monitoring, including, among others, in achievement of the target 1, 2, 4, and 6. With regard to target 9, at binary indicators 9.1, benefits from the sustainable use of the wild species, our delegation sees that a lack of component indicators as a basis for monitoring. We would like to request further information and clarifications with regard to the absence of this indicator, taking into account that the global information of the utilization of wild species, which governed by the CITES, could provide a global view on the sustainable utilization and wild species. With regard to the Annex 1 indicator 18.2, value subsidized and other incentive harmful to biodiversity or reform, our delegation would like to seek clarification of the wording our or reform. We are not clear on these formulations. Perhaps the Secretariat could shed some light on this matter. Related to this particular indicator, Indonesia would like to reiterate our view regarding harmful subsidies based on explanation and metadata provided in the document CBD/Substa/2614. Indonesia would like to prefer to use the existing definition used by the WTO. We are in the view that as long as there is already existing good governance on risk management from the subsidy process, then the subsidy itself could be not categorized as harmful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. Hungary, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Hungary reiterates the important decision taken at COP15 to adopt the monitoring framework of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We would like to thank with great appreciation this excellent and tremendous work carried out by the Octagon indicators and also the other expert groups that provided input supporting the work of the ACTAG. Hungary would especially thank the important advice of the liaison group on the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety to the indicator and associated questions in relation to Target 17. Let me also join Egypt, France, and others in thanking the organization of the information workshop before the start of this meeting. Such events would be appreciated in the future as well. Hungary welcomes the note prepared by the Secretariat on this agenda item and support the proposed indicators as contained in Annex 1 of document Substa 26/2. We support the statement made by Belgium, as we are also of the view that this meeting should provide clear recommendations on the binary indicators, taking into account the valuable advice of the ACTAG, as contained in Substa 26/2/1. In order to resolve the bracketed text of the binary indicators, we will hand in our proposal related to Target 14, 17, and 22. For Target 14, as Finland, we also propose to include the list of sectors. Regarding the follow-up process and review of the monitoring framework after COP16, Hungary supports the proposal of the European Union. Regarding paragraph 22 of the draft COP decision contained in Substa 26/2, we think we should make use of the ad hoc scientific and technical advisory group for the preparation of the global report, which was proposed to be established by Substa 25. Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, we believe that at this meeting our task is to refine the binary indicators so that a clean list of questions and answers can be sent to COP16 for adoption. We are very much looking forward to working with all of you for a good outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Hungary. Uganda, you have the floor, but before that, I would like to close the list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Uganda aligns itself with a statement made by South Africa on behalf of Africa, and this includes the adoption of the draft recommendations with amendments as proposed, and also the adoption of Annex 1. Madam Chair, implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework cannot take place without the indicators. In that regard, Uganda calls for further clarity on binary questions to enable better assessment and analysis of the level of progress made. Madam Chair, we thank ATEG for a job well done in adding value to the monitoring framework. Any gaps in the monitoring framework can be addressed since it is to be kept under review. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Uganda, very much. Guatemala, you have the floor, followed by Kenya.
Gracias. Thank you, Chair. We welcome the valuable work carried out by ADHEG. We note to concern the gaps identified in Annex 3 on research and development of indicators for the targets. Therefore, we urge that we recommend to COP that they continue with the work to develop the indicators in order to fill the identified gaps, in particular for the following targets. Target 2, where there's a gap in the capacity to measure the improvements on biodiversity, functions, services, integrity, and connectivity in restored areas. In particular, this is relevant at present with a high number of forest fires reported as well as flooding and other forms of degradation of forests globally this year, which is harming people and wildlife. For target 4, the indicator does not provide sufficient information on the recovery of species. Therefore, we suggest recommending to COP increasing efforts and resources to develop indicators and to improve capacities for the documentation of biodiversity, in particular at the level of species and genes, mainly for obscure taxa or little studied taxa and in biodiversity hotspots globally, with the aim to increase our knowledge on the level of threat of extinction and to adopt measures necessary to diminish the risk of it. Conservation of biodiversity is one of the 3 major objectives of the Convention. For targets 5 and 9, where there's no method to evaluate the sustainable use of wild species, and no indicator documents the social, economic and environmental benefits derived from these. Therefore, we urge to recommend to COP that they continue the work and allocate resources necessary to develop indicators which assess sustainable use, since sustainable use is one of the 3 objectives of the Convention. In addition, the conservation of many species is strongly linked to the reasonable use by persons. In Guatemala, we have a few examples of this. For target 6, the indicator does not involve impacts of invasive alien species in services, ecosystem services, nor the eradication and control of these species in priority locations. These species are one of the main threats to biodiversity. Target 10, the indicator does not broach inland fisheries and does not consider native species as well, which is essential for biodiversity. For target 18, believes it's important to improve the identification of incentives and subsidies which are harmful to biodiversity, since some of these can be confused with initiatives for incentives for restoration or payments for carbon capture, which substantively don't contribute to help biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Guatemala. Kenya, you have the floor, followed by Tanzania.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wish to team up with the administration to welcome every one of you to this beautiful country. I also wish to register our appreciation for the sympathy and empathy you have shown for the suffering we have suffered recently. Probably indicating the urgency with which we should move to implementing the KM-GBF so that we don't suffer those catastrophes. Madam Chair, Kenya supports the position taken by the African region on this agenda item as presented by South Africa. We are also in support of the position taken by the other parties from the region. We are particularly in support of the request for strengthening of national reporting and monitoring systems facilitated by a robust national clearinghouse mechanism through increased support from sub-regional and regional technical and scientific cooperation support centers under the coordination of the global coordination entity. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. Tanzania, you have the floor, followed by China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking on behalf of the Tanzanians, and since it's the first time Tanzania takes the stand today, with a heavy heart, we express our condolences to Kenyan citizens who lost their relatives during the floods that were happening in the past weeks. First of all, Tanzania supports South Africa, Morocco, and other African countries on their statements regarding the agenda. We are supportive of the Substat 26/2 document, and we understand the importance of using it. First, Tanzania accepts the monitoring framework and appreciates the work that was done by the group of experts that developed it, and it will be used in the development of the country's biodiversity strategic action plan, which will help to align the targets of the KM-GBF with those of our country. And we believe without the developed framework, achieving the KM-GBF will be a tedious work. Second, Tanzania adopts most proposed indicators in the Annex 1, and we stand ready to participate in the discussions concerning the improvement of the indicators gaps that were present and noticed by other speakers. Thirdly, Tanzania recommends that capacity building and financial support is highly needed to most of the developing countries to help them develop their MDSAs before the COP16, as we are running out of time. and hence more work should be done in order to make the framework user-friendly to the parties. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Tanzania. China, you have the floor, followed by Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We thank ARTEC and other expert groups for their fruitful work. We agree with the ARTEC's conclusions on the gaps identified in the monitoring framework, including indicators on assets and benefit sharing and spatial planning. These gaps should be gradually filled through continuous study and review on the indicators. We noted that the monitoring framework places higher demands on national capacities for monitoring data assets analysis and management. We believe that, according to national circumstances and national capacities, timely financial, scientific, and technological and capacity building support should be provided to parties so that the monitoring framework can be applied at the national level. We look forward to working with all parties under the monitoring framework, strengthening consultations on the draft recommendations and their analysis, so as to jointly promote the implementation of the KMGBF at the national level. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, China. Zimbabwe, you have the floor, followed by Nepal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Zimbabwe supports the statement made by South Africa on behalf of the Africa Group. Zimbabwe also wishes to express its gratitude to the ARTEC for reviewing the framework under discussion, which gives indicative direction on how we can monitor the GBF. However, there is need to fine-tune some of the headline component and binary indicators for effectiveness and efficiency. Let us use the time at hand to fine-tune the framework, especially focusing on targets earlier on identified as needing further work, particularly for without any indicators. This is a very critical document for monitoring the implementation of the GBF. We will provide our detailed suggestions in the contact group. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. Nepal, you have the floor, followed by India.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, I would like to sincerely congratulate to the team for their diligent review and identification of gaps in the monitoring framework. We greatly appreciate the hard work and comprehensive reporting. Representing the Himalayan region and the mountainous country of Nepal, our region boasts rich biodiversity while simultaneously facing vulnerabilities such as climate change, land use change, pollution, forest fires, and invasive species, among others. Biodiversity holds critical importance for Nepal, serving as a cornerstone for addressing human well-being and offering options for climate change adaptation, which disproportionately affects our region compared to others. During ongoing revision of Nepal's National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan for the present Global Biodiversity Framework, it became evident that our national targets and indicators encountered challenges in alignment with the global framework, primarily due to the unique mountain ecosystem covering over 80% of Nepal's territory. While Nepal is committed to aligning its target and indicators with the global targets, it is imperative to recognize the significance of mountain ecosystem, which covers 27% of the global terrestrial areas and hosts half of the 36 biodiversity hotspots, deserving attention akin to marine and inland water bodies. Global targets, though aiming to the generic and flexible, often disregard the uniqueness and complexity of the ecosystem found in mountainous countries like Nepal. The substantial dissimilarities of 86% between national and global targets underscores the urgent need for tailored attention to mountain regions. Incorporating targets and indicators that address the specific challenges and priorities of mountainous areas, including their distinct ecosystem, biodiversity, and socioeconomic dynamics, would be highly advantageous. Many of these challenges were addressed by the program of work on mountain biodiversity. Therefore, integrating mountain-relevant targets and indicators into the monitoring framework being prepared by the CBD or revitalizing the program of work on mountain biodiversity could significantly enhance the relevance and effectiveness of the Convention on Biological Diversity for mountainous regions. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and hope the parties with mountains will keep on this in priority for stronger advocacy and endorsement. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Nepal. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the outset, I would like to begin by expressing our heartfelt condolences and sympathies to the people of Kenya, Brazil, and other countries who have suffered loss of life and properties in the recent floods, and also express our solidarity with them in these difficult and challenging times. India acknowledges and appreciates the comprehensive work being undertaken by the ad hoc technical expert group on indicators for the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. India is expecting greater clarity on the headline indicators for targets like 16, 17, 19, 20, 22, and 23. Some targets have incomplete headline indicators, that is target 5, and some do not have headline indicators at all, that is targets 22 and 23. If these are provided, we will be getting a complete picture of what we are trying to achieve through the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which is to address both direct and indirect drivers of biodiversity loss. It will be crucial to take up the issue in the current substa discussions and encourage a decision to open the possibility of suggesting headline indicators for the targets that don't have those, in order to achieve a balance in the implementation that will ensure the full achievement of all targets in the framework, keeping in mind our own national circumstances. We are pleased to inform that we have adopted that template in Annex 1 as prescribed in paragraph 6 of Decision 15/6, and will be submitting our national targets in the required template before COP16. The use of the standard template in Annex 1 to Decision 15/6 for submission of information on national targets under the National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans will greatly improve the ability to carry out a global analysis of the information contained in them and improve the quality of the analysis. I would like to support Brazil and Russia in reiterating that the national and regional monitoring system needs to be strengthened as per our national circumstances. I would also like to mention here that the review and monitoring system can yield the desired outcome only if the means of implementation, that is capacity building, technological know-how, and finances are provided with speed, are flexible in scope to suit the national circumstances, and are provided at a scale to meet the national needs, as it is only then that the NBSAP and Global Biodiversity Framework can be implemented efficiently and effectively. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, India. Oman, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Sultanate of Oman would like to thank you for the document concerning the framework. We also appreciate the efforts by the expert group and the ad hoc group on the framework. We hope that the indicators developed by the ad hoc group will take into consideration the national circumstances with a view to putting an end to the depletion of biodiversity locally. We hope that these efforts will help our national efforts to develop their national plans with a view to meeting the global targets to revitalize biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oman, we exhausted the list of parties, and we do have list of major groups before we close the list. Now I would like to invite Secretariat for some information. And of course, after the lunch break, we will continue with the list of major groups on this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear delegates, you are cordially invited to join us for a reception beginning at 6:30 p.m. today in the Index Finger Garden here at the Union Complex. This garden is on the flag side of the building near the main entrance. We'll see you there. Thank you.